Welcome to The Poetry Joint, a podcast about poets, poems, and poetics. My name, Stephen Donahue. I have a scant knowledge of poetry, and that is the starting point for this podcast, to see what I can learn.
There's a light on in the attic. I can see it from the outside, and I know you're on the inside, looking out.
Exploring good poetry, bad poetry, sonnets, couplets, ballads, rhyme, no rhyme, grand verse, silly verse, concrete poetry, liquid poetry, words with meaning, words without meaning, old poets, young poets, radical poets, ancient poets, contemporary poets, confessional poets.
Angel-headed hipsters, burning for the ancient heavenly connection to the starry dynamo in the machinery of night.
The Poetry Joint. Hang out. See where we go.
Curses, invocations, weird bait-headed mongrels. I keep expecting one of you to rise. Large, buxom, obese queens, garden hogs and cunt veterans, quaint cabbage saints, shit hoarders and individualists, drag strip officials, tight-lipped losers and lustful fuck salesmen, my militant dandies, all strange order of monsters, hot on the trail of the woodvine. We welcome you to our procession. Here come the comedians. Look at them smile, watch them dance in Indian Mile. Look at them gesture, how a plum so a gesture every wind. Words dissemble, words be quick, words resemble walking sticks. Plant them, they will grow, watch them waver so. I'll always be a word man, better than a bird man.
That was a poem titled Curses, Invocations from an album, An American Prayer, with spoken word by Jim Morrison, backing music provided by the remaining members of The Doors, who added the music to the tracks after Jim Morrison died at the age of 27. T. Crane is a Calgary-based poet and has also spent some time in Vancouver. We spoke recently, and here is some of that conversation.
Why poetry?
Well, interesting you would ask that, Stephen. So the way I see it is, I believe that poets are born that way. I started writing poetry to my recollection when I was about 5. And even though I would go sometimes for years without writing, I was still a poet. Because it's, I think, a way of thinking, a way of being. From the root poesi, which is maker. So we make stuff. I always viewed it as making images, telling stories in a distilled manner. I also am very dedicated, up until recently anyway, to the oral tradition of poetry. So rather than feeling it had to be written down, it had to be, for me, delivered in the air. So the poem wasn't complete till it hit somebody's ears. I've seen paintings that I would consider poetry. I've seen dance that I would consider poetry. And when you meet the choreographer or the painter, definitely poetry is involved in there.
What are you doing now?
Well, now I'm actually I'm writing a book to get published. That's my goal right now, is I'm always self-published. I've been published in magazines and things of that, in a Capilano Review and places like that. But I've never actually gotten a publisher to put out one of my books. So it's sort of a project I'm on right now, is to create a body of work that is suitable for the page. So I've been working on that for a couple of years.
Yeah, well, so I'm guessing that's one thing a poet needs is I guess you may be writing or putting stuff together is a solitary process, but you need lots of outside influence. What do you consider your influences?
So when I was a young poet, I would go on poetry patrol. I dedicated myself to 8 hours a day being a poet, a working poet. And actually, for 4 years, I earned a living as a poet, which is kind of, I didn't know how weird that was until in retrospect. But I'd get up in the morning, I'd have my breakfast, then I would either do editing or writing, or I go on what I call poetry patrol, which I did a minimum 3 times a week. So I go out for about 3 or 4 hours on my weird little bike I had, and I would just take in stimulation. And then I followed a Jack Kerouac method of writing. I had an electric typewriter. And what he used to do was he rigged up a feed with a roll of paper. So I had a roll of computer paper that had no separations in it. And I would pop it in so I could type continuously, because the act of changing the sheet would disturb the flow. And I would end up with a big ream of this stuff. And then I'd just go through it and edit out and find the work in there. It was like a sculptural process. So removing the material to reveal the art. And I wrote like that for many years.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, because one question I've always, not always, but often asked poets is, I'd read one quote where somebody said, do you have a muse? And they said, yes, I meet it every morning at 9 o'clock in my office.
Yeah.
And other people would say, no, I write when something moves through me and I feel the urge to write.
That's the way I heard that described. I forget their name, but they were talking about the muse. Someone asked them a similar question. And they said, it feels like a dragon that's flying towards you. And if you don't get your paper and your pen out quick enough, it'll go right by. Unless you reach up and you grab it, and maybe you'll get a piece of the tail and hold on to it enough that you can get a poem. And very much when I heard that description, I'm like, yeah, that's what it feels like. It's like when it's coming, it's like, oh, I got to write this down. I got to just dump this out. And so I always carry a notebook and a pen with me, because when it does come, I wanted to practice this by not being attached to things. So I didn't carry a notebook and pen for about 2 years, where when the dragon came, I would just start reciting, knowing that those words would be lost once I had said them. And so I was giving a poem into the atmosphere. And that was really cool. It was very freeing in a way to allow that to just pass through without being attached to it.
Okay, so there's some T. Crane poems floating around in the ether.
It could well be. Yeah, I'm sure there's all kinds of great poet poems. Not that I'm a great poet, but all kinds of art floating in the ether.
We'll just take a little break in the conversation and grab one of the T. Crane poems from a recent reading at a Single Onion event. The poem titled Freedom.
Hello, this is really cool. We started Single Onion down at Beatniks, so it's kind of cool to have a very similar relative that poems are going on in. So this is a poem called Freedom. It's about freedom, true freedom, real freedom, a heart pulse of shock, a flare above solar, and it's completely internal. Freedom cannot be bought, granted, or dropped from an aircraft. It does not land on beaches and roll 250 miles per week through the Stone Age. It does not reestablish water and electricity and condone looting as expected. Freedom, true freedom, real freedom is internal, is a solar, a flare above the drama. It transcends all drama. It is not a manacle of comfort. Free thought, free action, freedom of speech is best, especially when people are listening. And we are wrapped in this concept, that freedom is a concept that keeps us enslaved. We are told mercilessly what our freedom looks like, what returns it's supposed to yield, what religion it smokes, what disappointment it brings. We are told to suck it up. Life is hard and you gotta work for your freedom, and we are all such hard working meat puppets, especially the bullfinches. But freedom, true freedom, real freedom, sings you electric, awakens the realizing that all on this planet dwell beneath one sun and one moon, separated only by pools of water. Freedom is born of laughter, is a higher purpose, and is already ours. Freedom exists inside us always. We need only learn how to use it. And when we do, when all of us do, this world will heal in a single heartbeat.
There are a variety of Single Onion events. Single Onion poetry reading schedule can be found at the singleonion.wordpress.com, and a variety of other social media sources. Back to our conversation with T. Crane.
You were mentioning, I think in our phone conversation, something about working with young people or street people on developing their poetry skills.
One of the projects that I did was in Vancouver. I became aware of a magazine called Slice Magazine, and it was put out by a group of kids that were at-risk youth, and the magazine was by, for, and about street kids. So this thing was filled with raw poetry, artwork, everything. And what I loved about it was they wrote it, they edited it, and they brought it to a printer to print it through the Ministry of Child Services or whatever. And then they were all given copies that they could sell for whatever much they wanted. Rather than panhandling, they were selling the artwork. And when I heard about that, I went and talked to their worker, Wendy, and pitched them and said, hey, I got an art gallery downtown here that's available, and I would like to teach them how to perform their work. Would that be okay? So she pitched the kids. They were all gung for it. And so we settled on a group of 15. And the only way in was if somebody left. And it turned out that one of the kids didn't like performing. So I was a technician as well. I did sound and lights and all that stuff. So I made him the technician. So I taught him how to do tech. So he was our sound guy, lighting guy. And the rest of the kids taught them how to perform and how to craft their poems so that they could be delivered in a performative way. And I'll never forget our first show. I'm up in the loft and I'm looking down as people are coming in, and it was packed. We went out to our mailing list and everybody, and people were excited. And one of the kids, Wiz, was standing next to me. He's going, where do all these people come from? And I said, well, they're interested in hearing your poetry and what you got to say. And he went, huh. So the very same people that spit on me and ignore me are paying money to come and hear what I got to say? And I went, yeah. He goes, wow, poetry rocks. And I said, sure does.
Yeah.
But we ended up, I took them on a tour of the Gulf Islands. We got them into, some of us poets from Vancouver were contracted by Lollapalooza to perform and tour with them. So we got the Slice Kids in on the stage in Vancouver. And it was a really exciting project. Lasted for about 2.5, almost 3 years before the ministry said that they needed to have social workers running the program. And of course, the workers weren't poets, so.
Influences? Do you have any influences of that you've carried through the years?
My early influence, the biggest one I had when I was young, was Sylvia Plath. When I discovered her work, I was at university, and I actually went and spent the night in the library at the university and read everything that they had. Just like I would go night after night. I read all of her letters. I read the novels, all of the books of poetry. I still have all of her stuff. I was crazy about it. That darkness really touched me. Leonard Cohen was another one, and then there's Stanley Cooperman. There's a whole bunch of not well-known poets, and then of course a lot of my colleagues and peers. We would always swap books, and some of them were just brilliant. Editing is a killer process. One of my first mentors is a guy named Kirk Miles. I don't know if you heard of him. He's quite well known in Calgary. Kirk Miles taught me how to edit. And what it was is he would invite me to his home, and I would go there in the evenings, and he would mentor me on being a poet. And I would come with a 3-page poem. And after I think the second or third time I showed up there with these epic long vomits of language, he said, I want to show you something. And he pulled out this 5-page long poem he had written. He said, this was the poem I started with. Then he picked up 1 page with 10 lines. He goes, this is it after I finished with it. So learn to remove what doesn't belong. Don't be attached to it. It might belong somewhere else. So keep it if it's really good. But otherwise, you got to be cutthroat and ruthless when you edit. You'll hear the voice in your head go, that doesn't really belong, no matter how good it is. Well, then cut it. So yeah, it was a really good lesson.
You talked about using the street kids and getting them to craft their poetry. What does a young poet need to do to start off and grow?
Well, Bukowski was asked that actually, and his answer was great. Take off your gloves, jump in the pit, and start swinging. And it's kind of like that, just begin. Some of the things that Kirk taught me became really valuable, which is edit. Don't put anything in there that doesn't really belong. Your job as a poet is to distill the essence of what you're trying to communicate so people still get it, but it really hits them. They'll remember it more, they'll feel it more, and it'll have more power if you do it that way. So I've always kept that in the back of my head. You dump it all out, don't worry about editing. And then once it's all dumped out, which is why I had that big roll, that's when the process of sculpting and bringing the poem out of the mosh. Now, that's the way I do it. Everybody's got their own way of doing it. So my notebooks are filled with, some come out as poems and some just come out as 5 pages of stuff. And then I'll craft away at it. Well, I've been a driving instructor. I've been a teacher and a mentor. I was for many years, I was a production manager, tour manager in the entertainment industry, and technical director in theater and performing artist. And so, constantly, but I've always been a poet.
For reference, here's a poem by Stanley Cooperman titled Parable. The ancient, honored, despised beast thinks again of what it means to wait, argues with himself, with God, with empty space, brays his thirst among hotels, counts his dead, buried with a boast of fruit, uneaten in the city square. His golden rug is raveled at the seams. The ancient, honored, despised beast knows that history returns like a blind eye, and holy scrolls are also winding sheets, chilled even to death. His blood moves heavy as bronze, but the hills stand stupidly, as always. None dance, and the nations prepare for his throat to be torn by the wind. Stanley Cooperman was born in 1929 in New York, USA, and came to Simon Fraser University, Burnaby, British Columbia in 1966 and became a Canadian citizen in 1972. He started writing poetry later in his life, after his career as a journalist, freelance writer, and professor. Another poet T mentioned in our conversation was Jaap Blanc, who was a sound poet. Here is one of his poems.
Tresli, Wesley, Nemagan, Lila, Fush, Carabalabas, Sakititsop, Sakititsop, Betsy, Brush, Carabalabas, Fashkitibim, Sitikitilla, Billy, Sikurisakaman, Fishkitivish, Sitikitili, Bizakitisop, Tresli, Bessie, Nemagan, Grugi, bla, Viola, Bimini, Bish, Viola, Bimini, Fush, Carabalabas, Tikititsop, Tresli, Bessie, Nemagan, Lila, Fush, Carabalabas, Sakititsop, Betsy, Brush, Carabalabas, Fashkitibim, Sitikitili, Billy, Sikurisakaman, Fishkitivish, Mumolo, Bambo, Sitikitili, Bizakitisop, Tresli, Bessie, Nemagan, Grugi, bla, Viola, Bimini, Bish, Viola, Bimini, Fush, Carabalabas, Tikititsop, Zig, Fush, Zig, Fush, Carabalabas, Balabash, Fish, Zig, Nebagan, Tresli, Bessie, Nebagan, Lila, Push, Carabalabas, Sakititsop, Bessie, Push, Carabalabas, Fashkitibim, Sitikitila, Billy, Sikurisakam, Fishkitibish, Mumolo, Bambo, Sitikitili, Sakititsop, Tresli, Bessie, Nebagan, Grege, bla, Viola, Bimini, Fush, Carabalabas, Sikititsop.
I believe that is a first for the Poetry Joint to have a sound poet on. The performer Jaap Blanc was born in Woerden, Holland in 1953. He's a self-taught composer, performer, and poet. His website, jaapblanc.com, has information on his work, his collaborations, and more. He was reciting a poem titled Seahorses and Flying Fish by Hugo Ball. Hugo Ball was born in 1886 in Germany. He was an author, artist, poet, one of the founders of the Dada Art movement, and a pioneer of sound poetry. In 1979, the music group Talking Heads used a portion of a poem by Hugo Ball for their song, I Zimbra. Poetry and Voice is a registered Canadian charity that wants all Canadians to speak poetry. It was founded in 2010. Its mission to provide educators with engaging content and experiences to inspire students to read, recite, and write poetry. Here are a couple of winners of their National Student Recitation Contest.
Noel Samir, Glen Lawn Collegiate, Winnipeg, Manitoba.
Poor speaker, Sonnet LaBay. I understand you. I get what you're trying to say. What you're trying to say is you want me to get it. I get it. You want me to understand. You want me to know, not the words, but what's behind them. Got it. You're trying to tell me what you want me to hear. What I hear is all words, but that's not all there is. I totally comprehend. There's a comprehensive totality, beyond or above or within or outside, whatever you just said. Yes, your vocabulary can't put the nuance on the fine feeling you wish to express. Not that you're feeling fine, I know. Rather, the feeling is fine, like a fine point. Right. That's the point. I get it. If you could say so, you would. You still want me to understand? I told you from the beginning, I'm with you. I got it. Why keep going on? It's gotten. It's all good.
I Am the People, the Mob, by Carl Sandburg. I am the people, the mob, the crowd, the mass. Do you know that all the great work of the world is done through me? I am the working man, the inventor, the maker of the world's food and clothes. I am the audience that witnesses history. The Napoleons come from me, and the Lincolns. They die, and then I send forth more Napoleons and Lincolns. I am the seed ground. I am a prairie that will stand for much plowing. Terrible storms pass over me. I forget. The best of me is sucked out and wasted. I forget. Everything but death comes to me and makes me work and give up what I have, and I forget. Sometimes I growl, shake myself and spatter a few red drops for history to remember. Then I forget. When I, the people, learn to remember. When I, the people, use the lessons of yesterday and no longer forget who robbed me last year, who played me for a fool, then there will be no speaker in all the world say the name the people with any fleck of a sneer in his voice or any far-off smile of derision. The mob, the crowd, the mass will arrive then.
Perhaps we have time for another poem, this one by Kenmore poet Nash Lott. Nash and his wife will be reading at a Single Onion event on July 3rd. Here is Nash Lott and his poem, Origami.
This is called Origami. I took up origami. Fortune teller came first, followed by crane, lotus flower, swan. As lotus flower blossomed, I began to fold the world into more pleasing forms. I unfolded crime, bent it into universal health care, flattened out starvation, reanimated it as free education. I formed new spaces. One neatly held Ukraine in hands of independence. Another, the shape of a woman, hugged thousands of orphan children. One was simply food, another housing. But as hard as I tried, I failed to fold war into peace. We are dying from reams of cuts across this torn and crumpled world. If we work together, could we fold the finest plane? One with seats enough to fly hearts and minds to a place where there are no pearly gates, no lofty clouds, no white-bearded man. Simply a bridge from the birth of inhumanity to the deck of a child's paper sailboat, a sailboat so real, so buoyant, that even I could believe there's a heaven.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Poetry Joint. We'll be back again in a month's time with more Poets, Poems, and Poetics. As an added bonus for online listeners, this poet, who achieved success later in life, became a poet laureate of the United States at the age of 95 and kept writing poetry up to the age of 100. The poet Stanley Kunitz, the poem Touch Me.
Summer is late, my heart. Words plucked out of the air some 40 years ago, when I was wild with love and torn almost in two, scatter like leaves this night of whistling wind and rain. It is my heart that's late. It is my song that's flown outdoors all afternoon under a gunmetal sky, staking my garden down. I kneel to the crickets trilling underfoot as if about to burst from their crusty shells, and like a child again, marvel to hear so clear and brave a music pour from such a small machine. What makes the engine go? Desire, desire, desire. The longing for the dance stirs in the buried life. One season only, and it's done. So let the battered old willow thrash against the window panes, and the house timbers creak. Darling, do you remember the man you married? Touch me. Remind me who I am.